Okay. Iya nila pramadana karuna prachur Iya nila pramadana karuna prachur Heno Prabhu Kartagela Acharya Thakur Kahamura Swarupa Kasanatan Kahadasa Raghunatha Patita Bhava Kahamura Bhatta Yuga Katas Kavira Ekakalikata Gela Goranatara Apashani Kotibo Mata Anari Pashibo Goranga Gunira Nini Katagela Tabu Sisaba Sangira Sangi Chikolyo Bila Sisangana Paya Kange Naratamoda Eyanilo Pramadana Karuna Prachur Heno Prabhu Kartagela Acharya Thakur Jaya Vaishnava Thakur Jaya Vaishnava Thakur Vaishnava Thakur Jaya Vaishnava Thakur he who brought the treasure of divine love and who was filled with compassion and mercy, where has such a personality as Srinivasacharya gone? Where is my Swarup Damodar and Rupa Goswami? Where is Sanatan? Where is Raghunath Das, the saviour of the fallen? Where are my Raghunath Bhatta and Gopal Bhatta? And where is Krishnadas Kaviraj? Where did Lord Gauranga, the great dancer, suddenly go? I will smash my head against the rock and enter into the fire. Where will I find Lord Gauranga, the reservoir of all wonderful qualities? Being unable to obtain the association of Lord Gauranga, accompanied by all these devotees, in whose association he performed his pastimes, Narottam Das simply weeps. Oh. Yes, so today is the disappearance day of Srila Ramanujacarya. And he doesn't come in our succession, actually he's from the Sri Sampradaya. He comes in, we see Prabhupada, so many times he mentions Ramanuja in his writings and his purports. So it's he's a very amazing personality. So Ramanujacarya is well known as a great philosopher and a very great acharya of the Sri Vaishnava Sampradaya. And the Sri Sampradaya was originally started by Lakshmi Devi herself. So 300 years before Ramanuja's appearance, we know that was Sankaracharya had attempted to establish the doctrine of the absolute oneness, that nothing exists anywhere except Brahman, which is a formless, changeless, eternal, devoid of all attributes. He's describing the Supreme Lord as formless, changeless, eternal, devoid of all attributes. So a large section of Ramanuja's writings are dedicated to refuting these impersonal teachings of Sankara. Actually, there was a book out. He wrote a book, 108 Refutations Against the Mayavadi impersonal philosophy. And he presented this logical alternative to the Mayavad philosophy called the Vishishta Dvaita Vada, which gives solid philosophical basis for the teaching the path of bhakti yoga, the path of devotion to the Supreme Lord, which is the only true path to liberation, as verified by all authorized Vedic literatures. So it's interesting because there's a whole reason why how Krishna brought, when the religious pure Vaishnavism was lost or disarrayed, how he brought it back. It's we know that 2,500 years ago, 2,600 years ago, people began slaughtering innocent animals for food and justifying this act by misconstruing the writings of the Vedas, which talk about sacrificing an old cow or into the fire or horse to prove the authenticity of the sacrifice. And so Lord Vishnu, he incarnated as Lord Buddha to draw people's mind away from the Vedas, which are all misconstruing and misinterpreting. And he taught them these sub-religious principles, such as non-violence, vegetarianism. Actually, these are one of the missions of Lord Buddha, to bring people back to stop killing the animals, stop slaughtering the cows, non-violence. And then, of course, Krishna, after Lord Buddha, Krishna sent Lord Shiva in the form of Brahmana, called Sankaracharya. Now, he re-established people's faith in the Vedas. Lord Buddha, he told them, don't read the Vedas because they were misconstruing and misinterpreting it. So Sankaracharya, he was an incarnation of Lord Shiva. He re-established people's faith in the Vedas by teaching this philosophy of impersonalism. Thus he brought people from Buddhism to impersonalism. And then Krishna, he sent Ramanujacarya in 1017, and then Madhvacharya, we were hearing about yesterday, in 1238, to bring people from impersonalism back to impersonalism, back to personalism. Re-establishing their understanding. There is a personal form of the Supreme Lord. So it's yes. So from the beginning of his childhood, Ramanuja, he exhibited all the symptoms of a genius. As well as he had great attachment for loving devotional service to the Supreme Lord and association of devotees, and service to the devotees. And all these teachers, they really loved him. Not only because of his brilliance, because of his gentle, courteous nature. He was a special soul who was truly an embodiment of all auspicious godly qualities. As a young boy, he made friends with a very special devotee who was a pujari at the temple of Kanchipunam, and they would spend many hours discussing the topics of the Lord and the ways of devotional service to the Lord. And so when he was 16 years old, his father arranged his marriage, but unfortunately, 1 month after his marriage, his wife died, very tragically. And, the whole family, Ramanuja's whole family, was grief-stricken. So they decided to move to this city of Kanchipunam, which at that time was the center of learning for all the, Vaishnavas and Brahmins and philosophers. And in that city, there lived a very famous learned scholar who had a large group of disciples. So Ramanuja also became his student. And this scholar, he very much liked Ramanuja because of his pleasant nature, his quick intelligence. However, there was one problem. Why this relationship didn't last? Because this teacher happened to be a Mayavadi impersonalist. And Ramanuja, he was a pure devotee of the Lord. So although Ramanuja was by nature very humble and meek, for the pure devotees, they cannot tolerate hearing this Mayavadi philosophy which derides the Lord. It's so derides the Lord's supremacy and his personal nature. And it's painful for them to hear that. So it's so offensive, actually, very offensive. So at times, in front of the students, he would challenge the teacher. And this very much disturbed the Mayavadi teacher. He began to develop great envy towards Ramanuja, because people glorified Ramanuja for his purity, his high intellect. And there's actually there's a story here, if I can get it. It talks about that confrontation. Yes. I said, one day after delivering a discourse on the Chandogya Upanishad, this Mayavadi teacher, Yadava, he asked Ramanuja to massage his body with oil, as was the customary service to be performed by a student in those days. So while giving the massage to his teacher, another student came to the teacher for some clarification on a point from the morning discourse. The boy had failed to grasp the meaning of the 7th verse of the first chapter, which began with Tasya ita tapashvam buddham. So the Mayavadi teacher proceeded to expound this an interpretation which described the supreme qualities of the Godhead in a manner which was impersonal. So on hearing the words of his teacher, it is said the heart of Ramanuja, which was full of love for the Supreme Lord, was saddened, and hot tears streamed down from his eyes and fell on the Mayavadi teacher. So looking up at the touch of the hot tears, the Mayavadi teacher could understand that something was troubling Ramanuja. When he inquired about Ramanuja's distress, Ramanuja replied, "O great and wise master, I have been sorely afflicted at heart to hear such an unbecoming explanation from a noble soul like you. How sinful it is of you to debase the Supreme Lord, who is endowed with all gracious qualities, and who is the source of all beautiful things in this world. From the mouth of such a learned man as yourself, I would never have expected such a low and deceitful interpretation." Yes. So when he heard this, the teacher, he became very angry. He could hardly control himself. And then he scorned Ramanuja, saying, "Maybe you would like to give your own interpretation, since you obviously think you know better than I." Then Ramanuja began to explain some of the glories of the Lord. And when the Mayavadi teacher heard this, he said, "I see you speak as though you actually, as though there actually was such a supreme person. That is due to your childish ignorance. You have not learned your lessons properly. You should always remember that the Supreme is without form, without name, without attributes. That is the teachings of the great Sankara. In the future, you should not voice your foolish sentiments." The words of the Mayavadi teacher were painful for Ramanuja's ears, but out of respect for his teacher, he remained silent. And then we see later on it came up again, Ramanuja. and because this Mayavadi teacher developed this great envy towards Ramanuja, as a result, together with some of his students, they actually plotted to kill Ramanuja while they were on the school pilgrimage. However, Ramanuja's cousin, Govinda, he secretly informed him of the plot and advised Ramanuja to run away. So when Ramanuja, what he did during this excursion into the forest, he fled into the forest, ran away as fast as possible to avoid being killed. And after some time, it is said, he feeling exhausted, he lay down under a tree and he prayed to the Lord for protection and guidance through this forest. And suddenly what happened is this hunter came, a hunter accompanied by his wife. And they agreed to guide him through the forest to the city of Kanchipuram. So later it is said that Ramanuja realized that that couple wasn't just a hunter and his wife, it was none other than the Supreme Lord himself, Narayan and Lakshmi. And his heart became filled with ecstasy of divine love, and tears flowed from his cheeks. So 5 months later, the Mayavadi teacher and his students arrived back home from pilgrimage. They had thought that Ramanuja had died in the forest. And the teacher, when he saw Ramanuja alive, he pretended to be overjoyful. But internally, he was feeling ashamed that he plotted to kill Ramanuja. And he pleaded with Ramanuja to resume his studies. So then one day, there was a famous Vaishnavacharya, Yamunacharya. He was a leading Vaishnava guru of South India. He came to Kanchi. You know, he was very old at this time. He was over 100 years old. And when he saw the effulgence of Ramanuja from a distance, he felt this transcendental pleasure within his mind. And he began to think of ways that he could instruct him. You know, seeing Ramanuja sitting amongst this group of Mayavadis, he prayed to the Lord for Ramanuja's deliverance from such bad association. So it happened not long after Ramanuja once again came up against his teacher, and he completely just smashed his teacher's Mayavadi philosophy in front of all the students. And then he was expelled from school. He was asked to leave and never return. Then Ramanuja took shelter of an old Pujari friend who was very simple, pure-hearted Vaishnava. And he advised Ramanuja that every day you should bring a large jar of water to be used in the service of the deity. In this way, Ramanuja would quickly receive the Lord's mercy, and all his desires would be fulfilled. So, at that first, when Yamunacharya first came to Kanchi, he didn't actually meet Ramanuja. However, when he returned home, he sent his disciple back to Kanchipuram with an order that he should daily recite these beautiful prayers written by him before the deity. And when Ramanuja heard those prayers, he became very eager to meet Yamunacharya. So soon he left Sri Rangam and he went to meet that Yamunacharya. However, on the journey, he heard this shocking news that Yamunacharya had just passed away from this world. So when Ramanuja arrived there before Yamunacharya's body, he noticed on his right hand, that three fingers of Yamunacharya were clenched tightly, even though he was dead, passed away, gone back to the spiritual world. There was three fingers clenched tightly on his hand. It's very amazing. So suddenly the crowd just fell silent and began to focus on Ramanuja, who seemed to have almost transcended the barrier of death and be fully in the presence of Yamunacharya. Then Ramanuja mysteriously, loudly declared before everyone the three unfulfilled desires of Yamunacharya, and he took a vow to fulfill these desires. So what was the first desire? The first vow he took was remaining fixed in devotional service. I shall free the people from illusion by spreading the glories of the Lord. As these words were spoken, one of Ramanujacarya's fingers went straight on the dead body of Ramanujacarya. And then he took his second vow, which was to establish that there is no truth beyond Lord Vishnu. I shall write a commentary, complete Vaishnava commentary on the Vedanta Sutra, which will nullify all impersonal philosophies. So this was the second unfulfilled desire of Ramanujacarya. And suddenly the second finger on the dead body went straight. And then he took the third vow. I shall write a dictionary on foremost Purana that describes the nature and characteristics of the Supreme Personality of Godhead and the living entity, which was written by the great sage Parashara. So this was the third unfulfilled desire of Ramanujacarya. And suddenly the third finger went straight on the dead body. So Ramanujacarya, his divinely inspired words confirmed that he had been personally chosen to complete the work of Ramanujacarya. And from that day on, it is said that Ramanuja, his personality changed. He became very grave. He became very serious, and for long periods he would simply just become absorbed in studying the scriptures. And of course, after Ramanujacarya's disappearance, all the devotees in South India and Sri Rangam, they were just feeling this lack of an acharya to guide them. When the acharya leaves, there's always, even we see that even when Srila Prabhupada left, there was a lot of confusion, and devotees were really feeling that separation from the founder acharya. And so these devotees, they called a meeting and they decided to bring Ramanuja from Sri Rangam. So soon after, Ramanuja accepted the invitation of leading all the disciples of Ramanujacarya. So soon after, he accepted the Tridandi Vaishnava sannyas, and then he left Kanchi, he went to Sri Rangam, and he faithfully took shelter of his guru, and he just served his guru very nicely, setting an example for all disciples. So one day his guru, there's a famous story about Ramanujacarya, that one day his guru instructed him that you should go to this very special disciple of Ramanujacarya and hear about the mystery of mantra chanting from him. So he went there and he approached this person, but just to test Ramanuja's genuine desire to know the supreme truth. At first he refused him. So Ramanuja, he came back 18 times, and each time he was refused. But on the 18th time, the 19th time, you could say, it's only when Ramanuja approached this special devotee and begged for his mercy did he consent to award him the sacred mantra with its confidential meaning. And he forbade Ramanuja, don't tell this mantra to anyone. This is a sacred, secret, confidential mantra. So when Ramanuja returned to Sri Rangam, he was thinking about the potency of this mantra. And suddenly he was filled with compassion for the suffering of all living entities. So he walked through the streets of the city, calling out to the people, "Today, come to the Vishnu temple. I will give you the priceless jewel." So within a short time, thousands of people had gathered. There's a huge crowd of people gathered outside the temple, and Ramanuja, he climbed up onto the tower of the temple, and he shouted out, "Please say this mantra. Do this, and the Lord's mercy will be upon you." Then he called out in a very loud voice the mantra that that special devotee had given him. Om Namo Narayana. And immediately the crowd responded like thunder. Thousands of people were calling the mantra, and they said it 3 times. And he said it 3 times, and each time they got this thunderous response. So when the Guru who had given him this sacred mantra heard of what had happened, because he told him, "Don't give this mantra to anyone. This is a sacred mantra, very confidential." So when he heard that Ramanuja had climbed up onto this temple and given that sacred mantra out to thousands and thousands and thousands of people, it said he trembled in rage, declaring to Ramanuja's face that surely you are destined to live in hell for so many, many lifetimes. Then Ramanuja humbly replied, "If an insignificant person like me has to go to hell, it is of no importance. If so many others can attain the mercy of the Lord Narayan by hearing this mantra and get liberation." So the mantra guru, when he heard that, he was completely stunned. He was filled with great wonder. And he became peaceful. He embraced Ramanuja with great affection. And I think later, actually, he became a disciple of Ramanuja. I think I read that. So Ramanuja, he not only remained in Sri Rangam instructing his disciples and inspiring all the Vaishnavas there, but he also travelled and preached in many places, defeating many scholars who were propounding so many bogus philosophies, converting them into pure Vaishnavas. He also travelled up to Kashmir. That's very high in the Himalayas. He went up there. And he went up there to locate a very rare book which was needed to present his commentaries on the Vedanta Sutra. Unfortunately, this book, a very rare book, was kept in the hands of the impersonalists, who were very reluctant to let him see it. For they knew that if he got his hand on this book, he would be in a very good position to completely destroy their false Mayavadi philosophy. However, what happened is that night, the goddess Durga, she stole the book from these impersonalists, and she appeared before Ramanuja and handed him the book. It's very interesting. However, realizing the book was missing, these impersonalists, they chased after Ramanujacarya, and they reclaimed that book back off him. However, Ramanuja's dear disciple, he had already memorized the whole book off by heart. And this gave Ramanuja great joy. So after returning to Sri Rangam, Ramanuja was able to complete his Sri Bhasya and 7 other books. Then he toured all over India, preaching very strongly. Because before him, Shankaracharya had travelled all over India, spreading the impersonal philosophy. And now Ramanuja was travelling all over India, smashing the impersonal philosophy and bringing people back to pure Vaishnavism. He was a very powerful preacher. So when he returned to Sri Rangam, and he remained there for many years, he had thousands and thousands and thousands of disciples. Even there were 7 famous kings of India were his disciples. He had 700 sannyasis, 12,000 brahmacharis. Can't imagine that. 12,000 brahmacharis. There was 300 very renounced ladies, and he had this huge congregation. So he was a very prominent, powerful guru at that time, Vaishnavacharya. So he remained there for many years, and then eventually he was seeing that his mission on earth was now complete. So he decided to depart from this world. He decided to return to the spiritual world. So when he told his disciples this, they were devastated. They were so attached to him. And their love for him was so great. So when he finally decided that he was going to leave the earth, planet, they wanted him to stay a little bit longer. Please, just stay. So he agreed. I'll stay 3 more days. And during this time, he gave his final instruction. This was in 1137 AD. So he gathered all the disciples together, thousands of followers and disciples, and he gave his final instructions. So I'm going to tell you his final instructions. And the first one was, have faith in the previous acharyas and never be controlled by your senses. The second instruction, study the scriptures describing the Lord. The third instruction, don't listen to the mind. The fourth one was always relish the chanting of the holy name and qualities of the Supreme Lord. Fifth instruction, best way to serve the Lord is to render service to his devotees. And the sixth instruction, never follow the ways of a Vaishnava simply for material gain. Seventh instruction, always endeavor for purity. The eighth instruction, every day spend some time contemplating the greatness of the spiritual master. Ninth instruction, always associate with those who are surrendered to the Lord. The 10th instruction, avoid those who teach paths other than devotional service and those interested in sensual pleasure. 11th instruction, do not see the deity as stone, the guru as an ordinary man, devotees in terms of caste or bodily designation, the Charanamrita as ordinary water, the holy name as mundane sound vibration, the Supreme Lord as one of the demigods. 12th instruction, do not be concerned about the future, but depend always on the Lord's mercy. And the 13th and final instruction, remember the Supreme Lord always and take care of those who are surrendered to him. They're very beautiful instructions there by Ramanujacarya, his final instructions. And he told his followers that if you follow these instructions, you'll be never separated from me. So after he spoke these instructions, his final instructions, his leading disciple requested that he don't leave, that he never be deprived, but that they never be deprived of the sight of his transcendental form. So hearing this, Ramanuja, he ordered that the expert sculptor come and carve a beautiful stone deity in his likeness. And after 3 days the work was completed, then the deity was installed. And then Ramanuja turned to his disciples and he said, "This deity is my second self. When I cast off this body, you may worship this form of me." Then he lay down and he had his head on his one disciple's lap, and his feet on another disciple's lap, and while fixing his eyes on the wooden shoes of his spiritual master, he gave up his body and returned to the abode of Lord Vishnu. He went back to the spiritual world. Jai Srila Ramanujacarya ki jai. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. You don't have any questions I'd like to ask? Jai, okay. Srila Ramanujacarya ki jai. Srila Prabhupada ki jai.